So the Game Awards 2025 have come and gone, and the biggest winner of the night, almost to the detriment of like almost every other game that was there, was Clair Obscur Expedition 33, sweeping the event with a staggering 9 Game Awards. And with it winning all of these awards, this certain sort of discourse has really shot back up in popularity. And it is the fact that I swear that nobody can really be normal about Expedition 33. I have a bit of a theory, but it's going to take a little bit of explaining. Okay, so before we're going to get any further, I'm going to lay a little bit of ground rules here. I am firstly and foremost going to separate the actual quality of Expedition 33 as a game from the discourse. And I know that kind of seems insane because everybody's being weird about it because of how good it is. At least for me personally, it feels like the actual quality of Expedition 33 feels weirdly kind of separate from the actual discussion about it, if that makes any sense. I don't know, it has to at least be decently good for people to talk about it, but it's really not going to factor that much into the elements that I'm going to be talking about here. Also, rare anti-spoiler warning. There are no Expedition 33 spoilers. Okay, so my main thesis as to why nobody can be normal about Expedition 33 is that the game kind of unintentionally falls in this very specific overlap between a bunch of different audience appeals that individually on their own are just kind of like normal video game fan bases or whatever, but due to where Expedition 33 kind of sits relative to all of these, that they each kind of like amplify each other and make like the bad parts of each individual fan base like exponentially more potent and obnoxious and annoying. The first audience appeal that Expedition 33 has is a large part of the gaming player base that really does not like the traditional like Japanese game aesthetic that usually comes with JRPGs. Instead, Expedition 33 is molded in the style of a JRPG, a genre which, even kind of separating the Japanese bias, is a pretty niche genre in general. Then, yeah, a lot of people really don't play these kinds of games normally, or even regularly at all. Now, I want to make it openly clear. I think that people discovering new genres that they've never been interested in before with the right game finally clicking with them is not an inherently bad thing whatsoever. And I think all these people who have found a love for JRPGs through Expedition 33 is fantastic and is great. But these kinds of people really are like willing to openly talk about how they don't like Japanese games in a genre that is very much specifically heavily influenced by Japan and Japanese aesthetics. So the second major audience appeal is Expedition 33 being an indie darling. I don't know, just looking into the background of this game, the publisher has like way too much 10-cent money, and the game has one too many Charlie Coxes for me to say that it's like a true kind of independent spirit the way that I like to imagine. I would maybe count it more as like a AA game. But regardless of the actual argument of semantics over the definition of an indie game, spiritually, the entire industry has effectively decided that it is one. And with that label, it attracts a certain crowd of people that really gravitate towards that label. And you guys know how indie game fans are. Oh, big AAA is killing creativity in games, so we have to support the indies because that's where the actual innovation in games is happening. Blah, 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 blah. And then there's the final audience appeal, which I really think is important to highlight because it delivers like such an X factor and is like, I think the main contributing reason why all of this discourse is just so bizarre and weird. So out there in the underbelly of the internet, there is a sort of bizarre, loose collection of like disgruntled, bitter ex-Final Fantasy fans, for lack of a better term. There's a sort of loose agreement among these people that sometime after the release of Final Fantasy IX and before the release of Final Fantasy XV, the Final Fantasy series got bad in some way. Obviously, what got bad is going to depend on each individual person, whether that be the writing or whether that be the shift away from turn-based combat. Now, I'm not going to shy away from the fact that there are legitimate problems with Final Fantasy games post-15. I mean, look at my hat here. This group of people is kind of closer to like an anti-fandom. Really, the main thing that unites them is hating these games incessantly and finding brand new ways of hating these games. And since Expedition 33 is very much molded in the style of Final Fantasy, it is an extremely easy comparison to make between Expedition 33 and what contemporary Final Fantasy games are doing. It seems like a lot of these players don't specifically have a hatred for AAA games as a whole. They have a hatred for Final Fantasy. That they go for sort of like a politician approach that, separate from their actual beliefs and worldview, they will use whatever popular negative criticism is against these games to try to beat and submit Square Enix into doing what they want. Now, obviously, all these fan bases have their own sort of predispositions and preconceived notions and sort of interesting behaviors that really aren't that bad, kind of separate from each other. But since Expedition 33 kind of sits at the nexus point in between all of them, it kind of allows for a certain amount of overlap between all the fan bases that extremifies the worst qualities of a loud minority of people. There are countless tweets out there from random Twitter users about how Expedition 33 totally revolutionizes the video game industry and AAA developers need to follow in its stead. But like, a lot of what Expedition 33 was already being done in like JRPGs by Japanese developers for like decades previously. It's just a very bizarre take that feels kind of like totally removed from like the culture and historical importance of JRPGs in general. You also get this very bizarre like extreme vitriol towards modern Final Fantasy among this small minority as sort of like, oh, big AAA Square Enix refuses to make a Final Fantasy game like Expedition 33. And so it's your moral imperative to support Expedition 33 to show stupid Square Enix that their action combat system with their bad writing or whatever is not working. But Square Enix releases turn-based JRPGs like all the time. I mean, Octopath Traveler 0 literally came out last week. Another weird side effect of all of this overlapping audience appeal is that the loud, obnoxious minority Expedition 33 fan that loves the game like to death also seemingly hates like the actual like games and entire genre that inspired it, which is totally bizarre. I think about this one meme, which is like an oversimplified timeline of turn-based JRPGs where it's like original FF7 1997, 20 years, no turn-based JRPGs. Persona 5 in 2017, no turn-based JRPGs for like 8 years, and then Expedition 33. And I feel like that kind of sums up a lot of the discourse about this game. They're either not aware of other turn-based JRPGs that have come in between these like monolith mega titans of the genre, or they deliberately ignore it because they hate them. But weirdly, with both kinds of fan bases existing kind of in this particular space, it almost kind of forms like a political coalition, that each side kind of has its own goals and motivations that maybe slightly overlap with each other. And so by kind of being a part of this same fan base, it weirdly kind of creates a legitimacy for each side of it in its own weird way and can kind of feed back on itself. This can be most obviously seen with the disgruntled ex-Final Fantasy fans, who in 2024 would have been nobody. But with the release of Expedition 33 and this specific zeitgeist, allows for their modern Final Fantasy hate porn videos to reach millions and millions of views with some of the absolute worst takes and worst logic I think I've ever heard in my entire life. You know who I'm talking about. I'm not going to say their name, but you know who I'm talking about. Now, I don't doubt that this audience doesn't have a legitimate love for Expedition 33, and I really have no problem with that. My problem is that this whole thing feels extremely cynical. Like, I get that there's things that you don't like about modern Final Fantasy, and you want it to get better in whatever legitimate or BS complaints that you have, but like, isn't it weird that Expedition 33 is like the exact vessel for this thing when Japan makes JRPGs every single year, and yet none of them have had this sort of level of like Final Fantasy comparison envy kind of thing going on? Now, I want to contrast this with a group of people who are being totally normal about Expedition 33, and that is like the regular JRPG player base. That instead of doing this whole like weird comparison thing, hating on Japanese games and stuff, they kind of view it as like a, oh boy, two cakes kind of situation. That they view it as just like another cool game that they can play as well. And that's awesome. And so that's kind of what I'm hoping that Expedition 33 Discourse turns into in the future. That it just turns into like another cool JRPG. So anyways, guys, if you liked the video, hit like, comment down below. Did you play Expedition 33? What do you think of the discourse? What did you like about the game? Please do not spoil anybody. This is a spoiler-free zone down in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want to see more videos like this from me in the future. Hit up my Patreon down in the description. Give me some of that cash money. Incentivize me to make my videos a little bit better. Anyways, guys, that's it. And have a good day.